You mentioned alcohol and drug addiction, and those are solutions to a different problem. They're not there. We call them a problem. It's a problem to be alcoholic or drug addicted, but that is an actual valid solution to a deeper problem. The deeper problem is the feelings I don't want to feel, the thoughts I don't want to think.
Awekenge, this is Mental Metals, hosted by assailant.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mental Metals. I'm your host, assailant. And before we dive into today's incredible conversation, I have a small favor to ask. If you enjoy what you hear today, please take a moment to rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but also helps others discover the valuable insights we share every week. And if you find today's episode particularly inspiring or insightful, don't forget to share it with your friends, family, or anyone you think could benefit from it. Thank you for your support. It truly means the world to us. Now, let's get back into our conversation.
How did your personal beliefs about safety, trust, and community change?
All right. So you're asking about after I was shot and almost killed. What do I believe about safety?
In terms of did it initially change your beliefs in a way of safety, trust, and humanity?
Certainly. First of all, when I was shot, I was 26 years old. I was a traveling salesman. I had graduated with a degree in consciousness studies, but nobody was hiring people with degrees in consciousness studies because I was the first to create one. And so I couldn't find a job. So I took a job as a traveling salesman. And I traveled around the Southwest U.S. for about a year and a half, selling gift items and jewelry to stores. And in this particular incident, I picked up a fellow whose car had broken down in the Mojave Desert near Los Angeles. And he traveled with me for 3 days. And the third night out, he pulled out a gun and shot me 4 times in the head. And I had a profound transformational experience. Obviously, I survived, but he also had a transformational experience because instead of reacting with anger or upset or fear, I became very calm. I was communicating to God as I experience it, and filled with light and love, including for him. And so my response to the trauma and the violence of the incident was to respond with calm and compassion, not with anger and revenge. And that's what saved me, frankly, was my calm allowed the bullets to bounce off my skull instead of go through my skull. So the transformation was, first of all, I was outside of my body. I was experiencing myself as a point of light with 360-degree perception, and I was looking down at a little van with 2 people playing out a drama. And that changed my perception of myself. It's like, oh, I'm not that body. I'm not that personality. I'm not the person who's experiencing that trauma. I'm something else. I am consciousness itself. And so that shift of point of view was what allowed me to get through the incident, survive, and thrive. Because we spent the next 8 hours talking to each other to figure out how to get out of this condition where he was wanting to kill me and I didn't want to be killed. And he didn't want to be put back in jail and I didn't particularly want to re-jail him. So it took us 8 hours of talking and getting to know each other. And this was after 3 days of we thought we knew each other, but this was really getting to know each other vulnerably and openly about our backgrounds. One of the things I realized was that his beliefs put him in his condition. of being a criminal. And my beliefs put me in a condition of being a traveling hippie salesman. And we both had beliefs and experiences in our life that put us in that position. And so that got me particularly interested in beliefs. And I studied as many different forms of psychology to understand the brain, the mind, our spirituality, our religions, our philosophies. And I became a student of life because I wanted to know everything about life. Since I had almost died, I wanted to be fully alive. So all of that shift of point of view opened me up to the glory of life.
And would you say that through this interaction with him, as much as you had your own beliefs when it came to trauma, did this conversation shaped it in terms of seeing things in his point of view?
Oh, very good. Yes. I one of the things that happened to me when I was shot is I realized I don't want to die with anger or upset in my heart. I wanted to die clean. And I had studied death and dying a bit in college. So I went through my background. It was like a fast reverse movie reel. I ran through my background and I asked forgiveness from everyone that I had hurt. And I forgave everyone that had hurt me because I knew I didn't want to carry that over into the next life. I wanted to die clean. And so that included him. So I was already in compassion and forgiving him by the time we started talking. And at one point, he turned around from wanting to kill me to wanting to take me to the hospital. And so he was also changing his experience, his point of view, his beliefs from wanting to kill the person that helped him to wanting to help the person that he tried to kill. So this kind of drama and transformational experience affects both people, both points of view. So he changed his beliefs about who he was through this incident. At one point, he sort of held out the gun and he said, what would you do if I gave you this gun? And we were standing near a pond, and I said, I'd throw it out there in the water. And he looked at me strangely and he said, you wouldn't try to kill me? And I said, no, you have your life, I have mine, we're okay. And then he looked at me very strangely and he said, man, you are the weirdest person I've ever met. Now, I've told this story in San Quentin prison a number of times where I've taught the prisoners. And they're also totally shocked that I wasn't angry and didn't want to kill him, because that's the condition that they live their lives in. That's the belief in revenge, the belief in, the power of anger, the power of harm. And I was a hippie, so I believed in the power of peace and love and God's self. So whatever our background is and whatever traumas we've experienced, we come to certain conclusions inside of ourselves, who I am, what the world is, who other people are. And those beliefs then drive our life from that point forward. So the good news is that we can change the beliefs of the past because they're running us at the subconscious level. And so it doesn't matter whether it's a belief about yourself or a belief about the world or a belief about other people. Beliefs are malleable. Our memory is malleable. We can change it. It's plastic. They call it neuroplasticity. But we can actually go back into our history, into our memory, and change what happened. We can change what we remember happened. And that changes our conclusions and our beliefs. So we can change our beliefs by going back into the past. And one of the things I like best to tell my students is it's never too late to have a happy childhood. We can actually go back and change the parts of us that got locked up from traumas or from experiences by going back and changing the experience in memory, what we call the imaginal realm. And therefore, from that point forward, we have a different experience of life.
And in a way of, I'm just so fascinated of what you just said, anyway, and having that sense of not wanting revenge, or so that sense of actually having that peace and not actually allowing the emotions to actually take over you. And how do we actually like in terms of integrate this into our mental health, in terms of state of feeling that sadness, having that in terms of that emotion, having that best of emotion of not able to control them. How do we move from in terms of that peaceful into our mental health and things?
Yeah, such an important question. First of all, one of the elements that I teach in my training is that we have to feel a feeling completely and fully in order for it to be digested and to move through us. Now, and if you feel a feeling completely and fully, it usually lasts about 45 to 60 seconds. So if you stub your toe and you hurt your toe on a hard object, if you jump around and say, "Oh, I'm so stupid. Who put that curb there? Why didn't I, why did I?" Now I'm no longer in my feelings. I'm not feeling the feelings of pain. I'm thinking, I'm in my head. But if I stand and I really feel the pain of the toe and really feel it and just put all of my attention on that feeling, it will resolve, because pain is just information. It's, hey, something's wrong here. And once you receive the information, then the pain can resolve. It can be digested like food. And then the body says, oh, there's something wrong. So we need to go send some white blood cells there to take care of it. Or we need to inflame the area so that, so that healing can happen. Now, depression is much longer lasting, as is grief. But they can also be felt fully and completely and not resisted, because we have one way of feeling fully and many ways of resisting. So if I'm depressed, but I don't want to be depressed, then I have two parts of me pushing against each other. One part of me wants to feel depressed because I feel bad. Another part of me doesn't want to feel bad, so I push against it. And whatever you resist persists. So this is the first level of healing, is being willing to feel the bad feelings. And depression is often suppressed other feelings. So I'm angry, but I'm not allowed to be angry, so I'll just close down and feel depressed. Or I'm desirous, but my desires are not okay, so I have to hold myself back and suppress myself and depress my feelings, push them down. And so in this particular process that I'm talking about, which we call body wisdom, we feel the feelings and then feel what's underneath the feelings as well. Sometimes it's an experience that didn't get experienced fully. Sometimes it's a relationship that was broken in some way, like you're an infant and your mother puts you down and doesn't like you for that minute, and you feel her hatred and you disconnect from her. Or someone harms you and you feel angry, but you're not allowed to feel angry, because if you did, they would beat you up and kill you. So you suppress those feelings, and more suppression happens until we call it depression. So we have to often take it apart piece by piece and go, what's that part of the suppressed emotion? What's that? What happened when what happened to you that you decided to shut down or close down or not feel something? And so this process of unfolding or unsuppressing hidden or pushed down emotions is part of the healing process.
And you spoke about in terms of you said that it's never too late to have a happy child. And
Yes.
so something that I mentioned about Dr. Mete, Gabriel Mete, in a way of, he usually speaks about what you said, that in terms of your mind of not actually initially not just dropping you off that time once, and you feel like in a way of feeling neglected. He actually resort in terms of that, and where sometimes people end up deriving to addiction and trying to find that love somewhere else. So how do you actually change that traumatic childhood trauma? Either you were actually suffered from sexual abuse or physical abuse or verbal abuse, because one thing that myself has experienced the fact of verbal abuse, and sometime at some point that I actually stored it back at the back of my head of actually not actually looking at it and not actually paying attention to it. And as I grew up and I realized, oh flip, I actually experienced this. How to actually incorporate this in a positive way of saying that, okay, now I have experienced this, how my emotion to actually pass out and actually face them and make peace with them.
Good. I want to separate out the trauma, what actually happened, and the memory of the trauma, and the conclusion that came from the trauma. So depending on whether it's a simple trauma like a car accident, or you're in the war and a bomb blows up in front of you, or your mother slaps you hard and knocks you across the room one time, that's an incidental trauma. That's a particular incident that caused you to have that experience. There are more complex traumas in which your parent is constantly yelling at you, or yelling at you every day, or harming you sexually, often. And so the more complex the trauma, the more difficult it is to unpack, but it can be unpacked. And in either case, whether it's a single incident or multiple incidents, you can trace back to the thing that happened and then the meaning you made of it. So, for example, in neglect, okay, so I cry and my mother doesn't come. I cry some more, my mother doesn't come. I cry some more, my mother doesn't come. And then I stop crying and she comes. Now, this was actually a technique that was taught to mothers in the 1950s, is don't go to your child when they cry, because then they think they will be in charge and you have to let them know you're in charge.
Mm.
So this traumatized millions of people my age. Okay, because basically when a child cries, it says, I need something. And if the mother comes and sweeps up the child and says, oh, what do you need, honey? Do you need changing? Do you need some love? Do you need a hug? Do you need some food? Then the child feels worthy of care. But if the child is not getting the care they need, if they're being neglected, they come to a conclusion. Even babies, before they have words, can come to experiential conclusions like, I guess I'm not worthy of love, or there must be something wrong with me because I'm not getting the care I need, or nobody cares about me. I'm all alone. I have to do it myself. These are conclusions that, even though we don't have a verbal word language-based brain yet, we come to these experiential conclusions, and then we start living life from those conclusions. Now, just like a physical injury, like you get a cut on your arm. Over time, that cut heals and you have a scar. And the scar is actually tougher skin than the natural skin before it. So when we heal from a scar, we get tougher, we get stronger. Now, with psychological wounds, like we're talking about, if you heal, you can get stronger. But if you don't go back and find out what the conclusion was, then it's just an open wound. So in our process, what we do is we go back to the experience, which was traumatic, and we look especially for the belief or the conclusion that the child came to at that moment, because that's where the gold is, and that's what can be changed. Because the belief or the conclusion is a meaning we made of the experience. The truth is we were neglected, 40 times out of 100 by our mother, who thought that she shouldn't come when we cried. or she was busy, or she had other children to take care of, or she was running a household and trying to make money and she couldn't do it. But we come to a conclusion. Most children come to conclusions about themselves. There must be something wrong with me. I'm not worthy of love. I'm broken and can't be fixed. Right. So that's what children naturally do. So those are the identifying characteristics when the child comes to a conclusion about themselves. Those are the ones that impact their life, because we didn't get taken care of in that moment, but then we got taken care of later. We're still alive, so it must have been okay. It's like it turned out okay because we're still alive. But at that time, it was traumatic and it was life threatening. Anyway, I want to come back to your question. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. And something that actually you said, that in terms of when we look back into, we touched on the trauma memories. It's quite something I believe that's quite hard. And some people, I feel like that's why the reason why they neglect in a way of going to therapy, in terms of afraid of reliving those memories of, okay, I suffered this. So how do I actually cope with it? Because some people actually, in a way of their trauma, they had, I would say, suicidal ideation, because they couldn't actually comprehend the thing they actually felt back then. In a way of what I'm trying to say in terms of my question is the fact that how do you actually make sure that within your training, make sure that if someone actually incorporate in terms of incorporating the way of the beliefs, how to store the beliefs that you are not worthy, and the beliefs of actually trying to live that emotion in terms of these emotions or these memories result in suicide. How do you do that? How do you make sure that people actually find that safe place? Because as human beings, I believe that when we actually when we want to talk about our emotion, when we want to face our strongest fears, we actually need to be in a safe place. How do you actually create that environment?
Many people look at beliefs or think about beliefs as a mental construct. Oh, that's the idea I came to about myself, or that's what I believe. I believe in Santa Claus, or I don't believe in Santa Claus. I believe in Trump, or I believe in Harris. So, but beliefs are actually experiential. They're multidimensional because our experience is multidimensional. At every moment, we're seeing and feeling and hearing and touching and smelling, and we have certain energies in an environment. All of these things are part of our experience. And so our beliefs are made of experience. And so we have to go back to the experience, not just the thought. And this is where a lot of belief change techniques don't work very well, because they're changing the thought, but they're not changing the body sensations. They're not changing the smell memory. They're not changing what was heard in the mind. They're not changing what the energy or the environment was. So in our process, what we found is that if we go in and experience fully the memory in all of its dimensions, then we have the opportunity to pull out the memory and change it. But if you only pull out the mental construct, the rest of the memory is in the body. The rest of the memory stays. And so in our work, I'll give you an example. You mentioned suicidal ideation. So one of my clients did have suicidal ideation. I'm not a psychologist, by the way. I'm not a psychotherapist. I'm a therapeutic coach. So it's very different than psychotherapy. So I just want to make that clear so people don't take my advice as psychotherapeutic advice. So he had suicidal ideation, and even though he had achieved great things in his life, he was still depressed a lot. And so we went to look for the source of the depression. And if we think about beliefs, if I'm going to commit suicide, it's basically the belief it's hopeless. Nothing will ever get better. I might as well end the suffering rather than suffer. So those are beliefs, those are conclusions you would come to if things are really, really bad and they don't get any better. So we had to find the source of what's bad. And we went all the way back to his birth as a Korean child in America, but his mother didn't want him. And so his father took him on an airplane back to Korea to his grandmother. Now, his father was not a mother. So even though he was only a few days old, his father just let him cry on the airplane for 12 hours, right? And then he was handed over to the grandmother. And so those 12 hours we went back to, and he remembered the horror of crying, being alone, no one caring for him. And basically, he came to the conclusion that, that this is my life. I'm in hell. And so we had to extract that experience and show his conscious mind that inner child, that inner infant was experiencing this horrible situation. And it wasn't that he was in hell and it was inevitably going to be this way forever, but it was a moment of time. And in that moment, the father didn't have the capability of caring for him. And so by seeing it differently, by seeing it and going, oh, I see, I was suffering and there was no one there to explain it to me. So I explained it to myself by saying it's always going to be this way. So this is how we unpack memories that are the cause of later the experiences of adult life. And most of these beliefs are invisible to us. They're transparent. We see through them rather than see them in action. And so our process is all about going back and looking at what created them in the first place, and then changing it at that level in the memory.
And I'm not quite sure if this thing is this code that I'm about to read is similar to the conversation, but I also believe in a way of it within it actually part of beliefs and mental health. It's a quote by Friedrich Nietzsche, where it says, if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. And the reason why I'm saying I actually wrote that quote is within beliefs. And sometimes as human beings, when we look deep down within something, we fail to actually, when it looks bad, we look away. So I feel like that's when I would say mental health issues. And when you actually want to work on yourself, and when you see that improvement, and when you see the change, you stop doing it. You just, after you see that little change, you stop doing it and make it that, hopefully, now I'm feeling better. And I feel like with that code, when it says that the obese will gaze back into you, and I feel like that's where improvement comes in. And from your perspective, in terms of mental health issues, in terms of mental health in general, mental health well-being, how have, as much as I agree that you have actually, in a way of reshaped your own beliefs, you have looked things at a different perspective, how to make sure that you actually look to take care of your own mental health?
We talked about the beliefs that we take on ourselves, but it's important to also discuss the beliefs that are programmed into us. If your father tells you you're a piece of shit and you're worth nothing, you take on that belief. And now it's actually your father's belief. It's not yours, but you take it on as a child in order to survive. Have you heard of Stockholm Syndrome? Do you know this term? It's a term for a particular thing where if a person is captured by terrorists and threatened with death, they will very quickly adopt the beliefs of the terrorists. And so it's a survival mechanism. We adopt the beliefs of our captors, because if we believe what they believe, we are aligned with them. And because we're like them, they might not kill us. So that's called Stockholm Syndrome because it's named after an incident that happened in Stockholm. It turns out that all children suffer from this syndrome because there's these big people that your life is that they hold your life in their hands. They could kill you at a moment's notice. They could throw you out to the wolves, or they could stop feeding you, or they could dump you in the snow. And so we adopt the beliefs of our parents in order to survive. And we eagerly want to know what they believe so that we can believe what they believe and become like them so they will like us and not kill us. So many of our beliefs were inherited or from family patterns or told to us by people, by priests or by parents or grandparents of who we are and who we should be and what we should do and what we shouldn't do. And so we have not only the beliefs that we come to ourselves, but also those that are indoctrinated into us. And indoctrinated means a doctrine, a belief is put into us, right, by someone else. We have another process in which we take that belief out of us and we give it back to the person who gave it to us. And we say to them, this is not mine, it was never mine, it's yours, and I'm giving it back to you now. And I don't want it, it's yours, goodbye. Right? That's a short version, but basically that's a way of deprogramming the programs that were put into us. And when it comes to mental health, a lot of people's beliefs about themselves came from their parents or the circumstances they were in. For example, I'm working with people in poverty, and in poverty, the beliefs are, we're poor, we'll always be poor, it'll never change. That's a cultural belief, but it's also a family belief. And so when you grow up inside of it, you take on that belief. And that's how your life turns out, because that's what you believe. That then our beliefs filter our perceptions. So when I look around, all I see is the hopelessness of the world. All I see is the fact that it'll never change. But if I could change my belief and say, I'm in charge of how I perceive the world, I get to decide. I decide what I believe. Now I'm empowered. It's like, oh, I don't want to believe that anymore. I'm going to get rid of that belief and create a new belief. There's endless possibilities everywhere. That changes our perspective. It changes our perception, what we can see, what we can't see. It changes the possibilities we have for action. Oh, I can take action and change my life. So these are fundamental shifts in understanding that you have beliefs. The beliefs are structuring your mind. They're creating the feelings and emotions that you're feeling. You're seeing from a particular point of view, and all of those things can be changed. Your point of view can be changed, your belief can be changed, your emotions can be changed, your feelings can be changed, your body sensations can be changed by going to that core experience and shifting them. And so I teach 20 different methods for doing that, for shifting those core beliefs and core experiences and core traumas that set us up for life.
And something that actually mentioned in terms of deprogramming, and something that I have seen and also mentioned within my podcast, as last month I was doing a series on addiction. And I want to make an example of, I would say, alcohol addiction. I believe that when someone actually suffers from mental health problems and they have difficulties in terms of countering it, in terms of having those positive, I would say, remedies or coping skills, we reach to the nearest thing that we know how to actually counter that. Whereas someone that myself has grew up in an environment that alcohol was a very essential thing in the way of people used to drink a lot of alcohol. So I view it as, if I am suffering from mental health problems and I don't know anything that actually will actually help me, and also I won't be able in the way of, I myself, it's the first time in terms of hearing this thing of rewinding your brain, in terms of actually instead of doing this, do this. So one of the things that I'm continuing in terms of my example, in terms of when it comes to alcohol, I'll actually navigate my I would say my brain into alcohol because it's the easiest way to go, and it's the fastest thing that will actually just repress my problem that I have for now. And in a way of, I look at it is a temporary solution. Is a temporary solution in terms of from a temporary solution to a temporary problem. So I would actually view it as that, and it's quite a fascinating thing that you spoke about when it comes to the programming your brain in terms of the programming, the beliefs that you had because of these beliefs that you had from your parents in terms of these things about mental health that it's definitely within my community. It's still a taboo. And I feel like there's the reason why I quite actually started the podcast. And as years go by, I actually see why I actually started this podcast. Firstly, I thought that in a way of trying to find my therapy in terms of trying to actually just finding out what am I experiencing, what do I actually want, actually what really means to have this feeling. But after I have that, then I actually succeeded in terms of yeah, and how what are these feelings that I felt back then, what they meant. And it goes back to that quote it was said by Chris Williamson when he said that you, you said you have done the things that you said they would make you happy. It goes back to that quote, and it's quite. I just want to say thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you for being here, and really really had a different perspective when it comes to this, and actually interlinking it with mental health and how actually it goes with the person. Not only mental health, with your everyday life in a way of actually if how about I debug or how about I reprogram my brain in terms of beliefs. And sometimes when it comes to beliefs, I really believe that when it comes to beliefs, we are like this, like this. And in a way of if you are told this thing, you listen. It goes back to a conversation I just had with the guest, where when we hear a diagnosis from doctors and they say that we have 3 months to live, we believe them and we don't work on ourselves. We don't actually question it. Is it possible that I can live past this? The reason why I'm bringing that up, I had a guest that said in terms of she was diagnosed. I'm not quite sure if it was diabetes type 2 or what, but she was told that she has 3 months to live and she still lives today. And it's quite it's something that is quite fascinating when it comes to beliefs. And I feel like beliefs and I'm not quite sure if is it the same thing or what. Between beliefs and perspective, it's all about that. People actually try to put those two things apart and not actually include it within what actually when they hear diagnosis, when they feel a certain way. So yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Can I conclude with a final statement?
No problem.
You mentioned alcohol and drug addiction, and those are solutions to a different problem.
Mm.
They're not. We call them a problem. It's a problem to be alcoholic or drug addicted, but that is an actual valid solution to a deeper problem. The deeper problem is the feelings I don't want to feel, the thoughts I don't want to think, the experiences I don't want to experience. And so I'll solve it with the nearest food or alcohol or drug that can stop the pain I'm experiencing. And that's because we aren't taught to experience our experiences fully and completely so that they can resolve, so they can be digested and the remains pooped out, just like food, right? And so the most important thing I think for everyone, for all of your listeners, is to be willing to feel and experience bad feelings. Because children, when we're children, a big feeling is bigger than we are, and it's overwhelming. And we think that if we get overwhelmed, we're going to die. And so we push it aside. Oh, I can't handle that. Maybe I'll handle it later. but we never handle it. So it gets stuck in us. And so by going back and re-experiencing those suppressed feelings and finding out that as adults, we can feel our feelings because they're smaller than us now. We're bigger than they are. And so that's a shift in perspective. It's like, well, when I was a child, the feelings were too big, overwhelming, and I didn't want to feel them because I was going to die. But as an adult, I'm bigger than they are. I can handle them. I can handle the feelings. And so even going back into our childhood and allowing the adult to feel the childhood feelings and process them and hold the inner child and say, that's okay, I've got you. You're going to be okay. We're going to get through this bad feeling. We'll just feel it until it goes away. And that's a resolution of the feeling. And now, even for an adult who's experiencing alcoholism, by sitting with their feelings and feeling the feelings, as awful as they are, and finding out that you can actually feel them and they will resolve, that's a step toward sobriety. Like, oh, I can feel what I don't want to feel. I can experience what I don't want to experience and put my attention on it so that it can resolve and be digested. That's my suggestion for everyone, is to be willing to feel their bad feelings, knowing that you will survive them. They're just feelings. They're just experiences, and you're alive now, so you must have survived them. So that's my suggestion for your audience. And I so appreciate your having me on your show, Aseko.
Again, thank you so much. Really appreciate that, and being able to actually have those last words in a way of a message towards the audience, and being able to address that in a way of that part of alcohol, because sometimes in terms of alcohol can be, as much as sometimes people keep on saying that alcohol is good, but at the same time we can actually overdo it and not see where to draw the line, because at some point, as much as we are used to something and we can't actually draw the line between that. And as I'm saying, I'm thinking that we might never stop having this conversation, because actually it really shows that I actually enjoy this conversation. I don't know, like, I really enjoyed it, and again, thank you so much for your time. And also, I just want to, in terms of your information when the episode is out, we can, in terms of social media handles, do you have them? What much?
Yes, I'm happy to share this on social media. And I'd like people, if they're interested in more, they can go to liongoodman.com.